If you're a wine region affected by travel restrictions and uncertainty around in-person events, then Interpreting Wine's 100-day wine brand evolution playbook was made for you. This complete program leads and supports you step by step to implement multiple powerful marketing channels in your business. It's also guaranteed to deliver over 500 hours of wine trade engagement in 100 days or your money back. Learn more at interpretingwine.com/brochure. I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, the place to learn from thought leaders in the world of wine and marketing, welcoming you to the MW Student Series. Across these 4 episodes, exploring the personal and professional experiences of 4 current MW students with the aim to shine a light on the varied roles each has within the wine industry. And in each episode, we'll also be tasting a selection of wines that have a special significance to each guest. We kick the series off today in the company of Melissa Worrall. A native of Australia's Barossa, Melissa has over 15 years' experience in the industry, from cellar to sales, customer service to buying. Melissa holds a WSET diploma in wines and spirits and is undertaking stage 1 of the Institute of Masters of Wine program. In the episode, we taste 3 wines together, a Kerner and a Grenache, both from South Australian producers, Chaffee Brothers, and finish with a Carmenere from Chilean producer De Martino. All 3 wines are available in the UK from Enotria & Co. or direct purchase from the Great Wine Co. with links included below. Enjoy.
I started being interested in wine probably as a teenager, but not in quite in quite such an elegant way. So sort of, you sort of go to parties and in the Barossa, most parents generally seem to own a winery, so you kind of sneak in and steal the stash and then go and sit around the bonfire and that sort of thing. I won't name names because I don't want to get anyone in trouble from their folks these days. And then I decided that I wanted to work in wine. I guess when I was in my early 20s, I hustled Peter Lehman's to let me have a job in the cellar door, which was amazing. And then I did some study on, then it was the TAFE essay. It was classic grape varieties, standard, and then classic grape varieties advanced with a lovely teacher lecturer called Melanie Keynes, and I still think, I still look to her and go, oh, I wanted to be her when I grew up. She just knew so much and she just seemed so composed and she was just amazing. So I worked there, and then I had some babies and ended up working in cellar door at Yalumba. And that's where I guess I started getting a bit grittier and more serious about wine. I was working with an amazing Englishman called Gareth, who had the most brilliant knowledge. He'd worked in odd bins and that sort of thing in England before coming over to Australia, and just his breadth and depth of knowledge and his passion for wine was amazing. So I'm like, gosh, I need to learn more about this. I need to learn more. And luckily, Yalumba was an amazing platform because Yalumba are owned by the Hill-Smith family. So they've got the Negociants UK portfolio. So I was able to sort of sit my way through Paul Roger and Gagao and Antinori, all on staff pricing. So that was quite lovely. I don't think I was grateful at the time, but now I look back and I think, gosh, what a lucky opportunity. And through Yalumba as well, through Negociants, they do a working with wine program for their sales team and for the broader staff. So you sort of apply and you can do sort of programs where you go down to the Adelaide Oval and they have people come and talk. And so we're very lucky. It's Philippe Gagao flew over and spoke through wines and that sort of thing. So that was quite an amazing opportunity. Um, and then we ended up moving over here. So after a few years at Yalumba, I moved over to England with my husband, followed him for love. And one of my provisos.
Now in the story, then what sort of year are we talking about now when you
So,
moved over?
I've jumped around a little bit, haven't I? So now we are at 2014.
Okay.
So he wanted to move to England for such a long time, and I didn't want to. I really like my life in Australia. So I said to him, fine, we can do it, but only if I do the diploma, because back then, even at 2014, to do your diploma in Australia was quite challenging. There was only really Sydney and Melbourne were the only places that offered it. And being from the Barossa Valley, you'd have to fly in. It was just, prohibitively expensive for me to do it. So I said to him, fine, but I'll do it if we're in London. So and that's how I started my London network. I remember kicking around, and because I didn't know London at all, like literally this like completely green Barossa kid kicking around London, decided I needed to work out how I was going to navigate this public transport system you have over here and work out how to get to the school and everything. And I went to Bermondsey Street, and I was taking a photo of the WSET school sign, and I shit you not, I ran into an Australian who was from the village over from where I was from. Like, I didn't know him, but we knew so many mutual people. And I was like, right, yeah, I'm supposed to be here.
That's it.
That was fun. Yeah, that was quite fun. So I did my diploma, and that's when I started, I guess, my English network of wine people. I've met some incredible people in my diploma course, and that I'm still in contact with now, and others that I'm not in contact with, but I follow, I guess, on Instagram and that sort of stuff, and watching their careers sort of flourish and develop and grow with this sense of sort of like pride, having everyone, I guess, just see them sort of soar within the wine industry, which is really lovely. Yeah, so I did the diploma and started working in Austria, which is where I am now. So this is sort of like 2014 through to fast forward to 2019. So finished the diploma, had my lovely graduation ceremony. Started working on the buying team at Notria as data admin, and then sort of the role sort of has changed and progressed a bit as various movements and people leaving and the shapes of the structure changing. So working now as buying and brand assistant, so sort of looking after the small Australian and New Zealand producers, and herding the group of buyers as best as I can into some sort of organised fashion. Which is amazing. Again, I'm so blessed at Notria to have such an incredible portfolio of wines from around the world. So we're sort of sipping and looking at wines from, like we did a flight on kosher wines from Israel the other day, and then we were also looking at old Italian wines, and we were looking at some wines from Australia that were from the Adelaide Hills. Like, it's just the breadth is amazing. And it's sort of working with that group of passionate people that had made me decide to apply for the MW program. And I applied for it. I didn't think they'd let me apply. I didn't think, but they did. Somehow they didn't laugh at my application. And not only that, they let me sit the entrance exam, which was also dreadfully scary. And after I sat the entrance exam, I couldn't quite believe it, but they said yes, that they would let me study with them. So now I'm on stage one of the MW program, which is, I'm so excited, but I'm also completely terrified.
I can imagine, yeah, or maybe I can't imagine. Yeah, it's just a huge undertaking, but doable. That's what I want to say. If it's been done before, then surely you can do it as well. That's the optimist in me.
I'm hoping bite-sized chunks. I think bite-sized chunks will be the way forward, and a good support group.
I love the way that you told that. I mean, it's such a, in many ways, quite a condensed story that you've kind of gone through. And, there's, as always, I like to just hear it how you sort of say it, and then kind of, I guess, delve in more deeply into different areas. As I've already mentioned before we started, that your decision to kind of just to go forward and do the MW was certainly one area that I was really interested in. But I think where I may just ask you to sort of zone in a little bit more in, actually, for my sins, Australian wine is actually very underrepresented on my channel, not through design. It's just evolved over time, and it's been sort of, be honest, sort of nagging away at me that I haven't really covered Australian wine as much as I could have done. So I'm really interested for you to maybe take us really inside what you spoke about there in terms of your role now, and that important part of that role, kind of looking after those smaller Australian producers that you spoke about. So maybe just orientate us to maybe if this was sort of a new direction or a new position, and then of course a little bit inside of the portfolio, which of course we're going to get into a little bit deeper when we taste a bit later as well.
I guess on a day-to-day basis, it is sort of just making sure that everything's happy. So number one, that we've got stock of the wine, which is proving an absolute challenge, not only for Australia, but for everywhere else in the world at the moment. There's this small situation of global supply chain carnage. So making sure that, we've got the wine, making sure that the salespeople can sell the wine as well. So a lot of it's working with the demand planners and the forecasting, as well as getting the sales team enthused and excited and wanting to sell the wine. And that's part of, I guess, it's always like you're buying, but you're also selling as well, because it's getting them all revved up so they can then go forth to their customers and their, not only their customers, but their customers' teams, their customers' front of house staff, their customers, to give them the confidence and that sort of thing, to know that the wine that they've got is an excellent wine and it's wine of the choosing. So I think we're very lucky in our portfolio where we have people approach us as much as we approach people. So, we sort of do get several emails a week, even more so really, from producers looking to make a place in the UK, whether they don't have representation already, or whether they have representation but they're looking at moving for, and that could be a number of reasons. They're not, super happy with, maybe they're wanting to expand their volumes and so they need a bigger supplier, or maybe they're sort of only they've got like penetration maybe in the north, but they're really hoping to expand through into the south. There's a number of different reasons for that. So so I guess bringing on an agency, we taste as a team, which I find really valuable. So we've got probably hundreds of years of tasting experience if we combine everybody. But if we're looking at bringing on someone or, a new producer, we'll taste as a team. We'll get the wines up into the tasting room and get thoughts, get thoughts on packaging, get thoughts on juice, and then get thoughts on pricing as well, because that, at the end of the day, it could be the most incredible juice in the world, but if it's priced out of where the UK market, I guess, channels sit, then it's no good. So taste as a group, and there's always a bit of a hearty discourse. Like, obviously everyone is very passionate about the countries they look after. So I've got most incredible Italian buyer, Sergio De Luca, who's been buying wine for London for 35 years, and he's just been knighted for his services to wine in Italy. But he never misses an opportunity to rib on about Australian wines. So there's always a bit of banter about that. And then, of course, got the French and the Spanish producers and the buyers as well, sort of, what on earth is this? What's going on here? But it's good fun. It's because we get to do it back. I get to look at these Italian wines and laugh at the amount of Brett that's just like streaming through them. So we taste, and our palates are pretty aligned. I think not only are we looking for a wine, the packaging, the juice, the price, but also like, yeah, it's gonna fit into who our channels are. Like, and we are fortunate in, I guess, the size of Anotria is like we are quite multi-channeled. Like we can support the off trade more so now than we ever have before. Whereas our main focus has always been the on trade, and even within the on trade, you know, are they sort of like independent sort of wine bars, or are they sort of like, you know, nationals accounts, that sort of thing. So we kind of we can go for volume for some of them, but then we can go for quite small, niche, interesting parcels for others as well. And I feel like that's quite well represented with our Australian portfolio, and New Zealand as well. For example, we've got Darrenberg, which are an absolute powerhouse, and they probably fit across a number of channels in the fact that they do have some quite big volume. They do have access to quite a lot of fruit, but Chester's such a quirky Willy Wonka type character that is always sort of doing like parcel experiments, and that's really fantastic that you can have that recognition of a wine, but you know, if it's only a couple of hundred cases that are being produced, you can get that over, and that can go in a completely different sort of, I guess, market and sell option than something that you'd perhaps, you know, with Waitrose want to get in a wine. So that's quite good. It's
just to you know, give them just a little bit of feedback, really, and you know, it sounds like such a complex kind of you know, decision, really. You know, there are like lots of opportunities, and but really, you know, ultimately there are you know, business decisions to be made, and I think that, you know, maybe if you kind of tell somebody who's outside of wine, or you know, that doesn't know this exact specifics, you know, that I've been tasting today for you know, potentially a new agency or a new producer that we're taking on. It just sounds like it's, you know, the best job in the world, right? Just getting paid to drink wine, but
all you bloody do is sip and spit. That's all you bloody do.
I mean, like then, you know, does that decision then, does that look really quite different, almost agency to agency and wine to wine? You know, I'd imagine that you know, each wine and as you say, all of those different sort of stakeholders, like almost like no two processes are quite the same, or are you now sort of very much, you know, you get an instinctive feel for whether or not a producer is right for the portfolio?
I actually think that you're very correct in the fact that no two producers are kind of the same, because everything and they're not, because I guess intrinsically, you know, every wine producer and every wine has got something special. Everything's got a USP, and it's working out whether that USP is going to fit in with, I guess, who we are and what we provide as well. And I mean, it's hard because everything that we bring in to show with the team is, we've obviously seen something in there, like a spark or an element, or, you know, whatever it is. So, but sometimes they, you know, on the day, whether it's a fruit day or a root day, who knows? Sometimes they're just not, you know, you're tasting a wine, maybe you're in Australia, you're continuing Aussie as an example, and you think, oh God, this is the best wine ever. You get samples over and you sort of tasting, when all of a sudden you're in a grey rainy day in London, running in a tasting room, you're like, oh, that wasn't quite what I remembered that to be, which is obviously, you know, like, that's disappointing, but there's no point in you know, getting producers to spend, I guess, their energy and efforts and time and money on something that you just don't think is going to sit in with what the UK market are going to have either. But yeah, I mean, and we get, you know, the bigger ones, you know, like, you're going to have multi-channels, or, you know, you're going to be, you know, comfortably be able to use them for the off trade, and they can have that high volume. Whereas other wines, they're just a bit more, a bit more niche.
Yeah. I'm sure, and I'm sure again, it's that kind of knowing your customer and having those relationships, and you can maybe start to, you know, make connections of, oh, it will be good for that customer, or they would love this, and everything is kind of hits the mark, right? The packaging, the taste profile, and maybe even just something that customer has said to you in a previous discussion or something.
That's exactly right, and it's that whole I guess that's where the sales team come into it as well, is we always, you'll get a parcel of wine in, or you'll get a producer in, and you think, I know, you can almost predict how, which sales team or salesperson's going to sort of respond to that. Like, so-and-so has an amazing couple of accounts that, look at wine for, it might be indies, or particular salesperson might have lived in Argentina for 7 years. And so therefore they know that, they're your go-to for Argentine wines because they're going to really elevate and that sort of thing. Or, someone tends to focus more on fire wines. They've got a higher margin. So you almost, you can look at the channels and then look at the sales team as well. And that's then, once you've got the wine and you think, okay, this is going to work, it's when you get a few of those like key salespeople in to go as well, like, what do you think about this? Do you think you'll be able to sell this? What sort of pricing do you think you'd be able to comfortably sell it at? And to work with them, because then they know their customers. This is that trickle through. They know and they know what their customers want. And, as you said, gosh, that packaging looks amazing. Like, I know that's going to sell, like sitting at a bar, as opposed to something on a wine list where you're not seeing that really, vibrant packaging. And then trying to, it's almost like it's sort of like, it's artistic, but it's also super numbers focused as well, because then at the end of the day, like, you have to be able to make enough money to be able to, keep the electricity on, because it's kind of hard to run a business without that.
Yeah, no, totally. No, it's really interesting. And I think the other thing that also came to mind, and it felt as though you were sort of hinting at it as well as you were talking just there, was maybe like the impact of COVID, really, and really what that, and I think, again, I think your lens and your day to day and kind of what you do, maybe now with a little bit of perspective, sort of 18 months or so since the pandemic started, it would just be great to get a feel from you around, what I guess changed, in the immediate sort of, heat of the moment, really, back in March and April, and then how have things sort of either settled down or sort of changed for good, really, since then.
It's like the BC times, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah, I mean, it happened to me today. I was like, did this happen before March 2020 or was it after March 2020? It really is that significant.
So basically the answer is everything changed. Everything changed and nothing has been the same. So a big portion of us were furloughed, because a huge portion of our business is the on-trade. And so none of our customers were allowed to have their customers. So they didn't want to buy wine. So that was incredibly challenging and sad as well. Like everyone was just sort of sat at home and not being able to connect. And I think that's one of the things about the wine industry. It's such a social industry to be in. So if you can't be with your people, you sort of, there's only so much joy you can get out of drinking wine at home by yourself.
100%.
So we had to flip quite quickly into what we could do to what we could sell and what we could sort of, do with all our stock, as well as, what we could do for our producers as well. So we ended up moving into the off trade a lot more with things that, like, we've always had an off trade presence, but it hasn't been the focus of the particular shape of our business. Working to try and get that happening, as well as getting, wineries that would be not necessarily want to go into the off trade, but actually seeing that there's a good opportunity to move volume, and there's a good opportunity to move wine when nothing was moving at all. Of course, back in the BC times, even March and April and May and June of 2020, I just feel how almost just naive we were, that no one knew that it was going to hang on for that long. Everyone kept thinking, it'll a couple of weeks, it'll be done. Couple of weeks, it'll be done. So you sort of make decisions thinking 6 weeks time, everything's going to be back to normal. Then of course it isn't. So yeah, we had to shift a lot from the onto the off trade, and we're very lucky that we've got a great team that have worked incredibly hard to make that happen, and the sales team as well had to sort of shift quite a lot, in sort of how they were doing their business, and we've done a few sort of online, and we were able to focus a lot into our retail and build into that, and that's been quite a good success. They were a great team anyway, and they've just, I think they've gone gangbusters, which is fantastic. And then, how it's changed now. So our huge issue, our huge ongoing issue now is the global supply chain and accessing. So we basically can't get enough wine in after no one being able to buy any wine for a year. Everyone wants to buy all the wine, which is brilliant, but we can't get it. It's just there's no containers, there's no ships, there's no staff. Again, COVID, the pandemic, people are having to not work, or they're having to self-isolate, or people aren't in the countries they were because they haven't been able to travel. So they're like HGV drivers and that sort of thing. We can't get lorries, we can't get bookings. The paperwork at the ports, there's only 3 people doing 8 people's jobs because everyone's had to isolate. So that's been quite challenging and frustrating and a little bit disheartening for everyone. Like, our demand planners, schedule something perfectly, and it turns out that there's no 20-foot containers available in the world right now. Like, how on earth do you factor that in when you're trying to do anything? And then, of course, at the end of the day, that means that there's a poor restaurant that's going, well, hang on, I just put this wine list together and I just worked it out on these margins. What do you mean I can't get that wine? And you think, well, gosh, like there was no way that you weren't going to be able to get that wine. And that's really hard as well, because at the end of the day, it's, they're the ones that are, getting disappointed, but it's just such a long link in the supply chain that, a 20-foot container shortage has impacted why you've got to take that wine off your wine list. But I think as well, quite adaptable, and I think that to me, this is the lovely thing about maybe having that bit more flexibility of, you've got like a chef's special, you can have a somm special. Like, I wasn't able to get that. So it's almost like a chalkboard write-up of, oh, well, look, we couldn't get any Beaujolais, this week, but we've managed to get a small parcel of X instead. So rather than it being a printed list, it's
this is it. Yeah. It's turning that situation on its head, really, isn't it? Because it's interesting. I mean, obviously, can't generalize about every restaurant and every list because of all of the focuses and that. But I guess this is maybe where, London kind of comes into its own, because you do have, so many, the position being close to Europe and potentially, stocks having been on hand, and maybe even people having built up stocks in line with fearing Brexit, sort of back in the day, how long ago that seemed. But maybe it's actually, some of that has actually, to a degree, has cushioned certain areas of the trade against, what might have been a sort of a catastrophic, cut off in supplies.
It definitely did in the beginning. Like all the Brexit stocks were really helpful, but they're completely. I think they got decimated. You can't get Provence Rosé for love nor money at the moment. Even with this, but you're right. Like, I think that the Brexit planning, even though it wasn't for the thing it ended up being used for, that was very, very helpful for a while. But everyone got really thirsty while they were at home. They just want to drink now.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, it's super. I mean, super interesting to kind of get a feel for that, and maybe I think there is another aspect of I guess the pandemic that I think would be super interesting, because it sounds as though maybe the supply during that time was kind of still available, even though maybe people weren't moving. A lot of the things that I saw was that, at least early on in that time, that wines were moving, and I think that they were classified as essential services, and in many countries, and harvest could go ahead. All of these like really interesting things and really important things. But I think one of the things that also stood out for me was really the rise of winemaker produced content. I don't think I've seen more winemakers kind of going onto Instagram lives and actually getting in front of the camera. My understanding as well, a lot of doing a lot of work with importers as well, coming on and doing training, and just really just doing things for a lot of staff that had been furloughed as well. So it's not a specific question, but I wonder if you'd mind just saying something about what you saw and what you remember of your winemakers and your people kind of getting out there and putting themselves forward.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the pandemic did when we all had to be separate was to come together in other ways. And I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but no one could travel and we couldn't be together. So I mean, I know there was a point last year where I think I had had video Zoom calls and virtual tastings with winemakers and producers probably almost every day of the week, and wake up in the morning and there'd be a live tasting on with the Barossa Grape and Wine Association, which was about 5 o'clock their time, was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon their time, was 7 o'clock in the morning our time. So then I'd watch some winemakers there, and then we'd but I think that was amazing. We did a collection of things with some of our producers as well. We were hosting Instagram lives, particularly through sort of, I think it was April, May, June, something last year, where we were getting producers to have a chat through with one of our team, and then people could, like doing the questions and that sort of thing. And that was really wonderful because we were getting people from, South Africa and Spain and Chile, and, being able to engage and chat with France as well. It was nice to be able to have them there, even though they couldn't be there. And I think that was reassuring for them as well, like rather than, the countries that weren't necessarily at that time as impacted as what England was. And they were kind of looking from the outside in at us all sort of being so prohibited with being able to move and restricted with what we could do. But that was their way that they could help. If it was them having an Instagram live with, with one of their people, that was, quite a nice way, I think, to involve. And I think that'll be an ongoing thing now as well. Like that need of having to have someone there is like, that would be my first choice every time. But the fact that they can't, it doesn't mean the show can't go on. Even Milan Wine Week this week, they had everyone ready for the tastings in Pall Mall. But actually the chap hosting it was in Milan. So but it was done so live that it was, it felt like you were all in the same room, but without having to deal with the faffy travel.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. Yeah, I think to kind of look back with a little bit of perspective now and just sort of see, the adaptations and maybe, some of the things that we just completely take for granted now, and we just assume maybe were always like that. A lot of these things have actually only really come about and maybe even, only started to mature in the last 18 months or so, which is fascinating. And in line with that, something that I guess is still fairly new for you, having only recently been accepted, is having that, brackets MW student after your name. We can't say letters after your name just yet, but at least, brackets MW student, you've been accepted, which is fantastic. And I wonder, just, obviously it's still quite new, but I think the thing that would be really interesting for me and the listener is just to really go into that decision to do the MW and to apply, because already, and again, as many of my listeners will know, the diploma is already one of the highest accolades and most difficult qualifications that's out there. So why put yourself back through the ringer again, having successfully?
Why?
Why did you do it?
Oh my goodness. So I think I think we joked earlier about it's a labor of love, and you sort of do one, and then as soon as you've done one, people start tongue in cheek asking you, when are you doing the MW? When are you doing the MW? And I, ignored that for a little while. But I had, so probably what led to it is at the end of 2020, after feeling a little bit stuck from furlough, a little bit frustrated that I hadn't been able to, see anyone or do anything other than, virtually, I applied for the mentor-mentee program through the drinks community. Mm-hmm. And got accepted, and I got paired with a wonderful, wonderful woman who is my mentor. She's quite incredible. And so talking with her and sort of helping clarify and distill a few things on what I wanted to get out of, I guess, the next 12 months for me with my career, for me with my journey with wine. And one of those that I daren't even utter was I think maybe I want to apply for my MW, and it was such a big thing to even say it out loud the first time. But she was incredibly supportive, and as part of the application progress, you need to actually have a referral from an MW to even be able to apply to sit the entrance exam. So you actually have to have an MW, vouch for you and your skills and your knowledge. And she very kindly offered to do that for me, which I thought was incredibly generous of her. And so, that's what I sent in the application. She wrote me a reference, and kind of, I guess, from applying for the entrance exam and being told that I could do it, I have had so many conversations with so many either MWs or MW students. I cannot believe how generous and open they all are with their time. It's just amazing. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do the MW was basically to geek out with people about wine. And it turns out that that's a completely okay thing to do. You get to talk to people about soils and they're not bored. How cool is that? And that's been amazing. So it has kind of I've stepped out of my comfort zone, even telling people that I was sitting the exam, and even telling people I was applying, because normally I'd wait until I'd done it and got accepted. Or if I didn't, then no one would know and it wouldn't matter. But I thought, I'm going to. And from even posting it onto Instagram or something like that, I've had people get in contact going, I've got a friend doing it, let me give you their number. And then I'd speak to that MW student, and then they'd give me the number of someone else. And so just, even to prep for the entrance exam has been, this amazing collection of meeting new people and making new contacts and connections. And I can't wait to see them all in person. So yes, sitting the entrance exam and then getting in, that's been the same thing. It's been an amazing, such a high that afternoon when the email came through. It took me about 3 days to read the email. All I read was the first 2 lines, and then I squealed so much that I didn't go past that. But meeting other people that are going onto the program, and just that sense of camaraderie and shared purpose already is amazing. And we haven't even done anything yet. We're just sort of in this hazy, lazy time of, not quite knowing what we're getting ourselves into, only an inkling. So that's it's going to be quite amazing. So again, I can't think about the whole picture. It just needs to be bite-sized chunks. I've got Rust in Austria in January. We'll go from there. I've started already collecting. Everyone keeps talking about examples. You need to have specific current relevant examples for all the different subjects and all the different papers. So if I think something sounds useful, I'm taking a screenshot of it and starting a spreadsheet. It's probably overkill, but I don't know if I don't know if you could be too prepared for something like this.
Yeah, I know. Again, I can only imagine. And actually, yes, I think something that maybe, it's in some ways a bit of a parallel question to what we were speaking there before, in terms of the impact of COVID on your day-to-day role and on the business, and it's really, I don't know if in applying and in the sort of, the first year sort of being mapped out in front of you, there's been any reference made to, I guess, adaptations that the Master of Wine program have had to make, just, from the outside. And, what I've come across a lot of people talking about historically has been the value of visiting producers, those examples that you're talking about there, where you were talking about a sort of a screenshot. Maybe this may have been actually a conversation over a barrel, with a producer. I'm just curious, what, if any, adaptations have you sort of, kind of felt or even kind of been told about and kind of informed of?
So I am nervous that, there's going to be a flare up again and how it's going to impact study. I had a conversation with someone last week, actually, who has done their first year and unfortunately wasn't successful with passing through stage 1. So they need to revisit, which is a very, very common thing. I think it is, you basically factor in failing, which is, again, a journey in itself, is that the knowledge that you will fail is kind of quite a shared thing. But what she was saying is what she found the hardest is not being able to go anywhere. She, didn't really meet anyone. She didn't go to a vineyard. She didn't go to a group seminar. She didn't do anything. She sat in front of her computer. And although we were talking earlier about how wonderful that can be, and, you can get people from all over the world and you still get that wine in the glass, I think, it's not the same as walking through a vineyard and having a look at that trellising, or walking through the vineyard and looking at that elevation, or the way the sun is there and the river is there and how that impacts that vineyard, or the slope of that vineyard. You can look at the picture, but actually being in that immersive experience is what you need to kind of connect that thought and connect that fact, and then to connect that to that wine. So I know that the Master of Wine program did the absolute best they could with adapting as best they could. But yeah, I'm really, really, really hoping that travel will be back on the agenda for this year going forward, because I just, the value of being able to have those, I guess, those casual ad hoc interactions with the viticulturalist or the winemaker or something like that. You're walking from the barrel hall to the vineyard and you're having to chat about something on the way, as opposed to having, I guess, a more formal structured Zoom conversation. They just have a different tone to them. So that would be my take home from that. Please COVID go away.
And I guess to kind of as well, tie this back to what we were talking about earlier. I guess it's also where, you're in presumably quite a fortunate position where you are now, having access to those producers, and I guess they know that you're now on the MW program, and I guess they're also probably excited for you, and presumably, totally up for helping and geeking out with somebody else who will listen now as well.
I'm going to be hitting up so many winemakers on random yeast questions. It's just they've got no idea. But I am very lucky that I've got a good connection of like sort of vignerons and winemakers, and sort of, cellar hands and lab techs, and, across the gamut of stuff, through my work. And then of course in London, you've got the whole business side of the wine. I'm going to be asking a lot of left field questions. I'm currently reading about David Bird's winemaking book at the moment, and I'm already fashioning questions to send back to Australia to different winemakers. Well, what do you do when you do this? So how do you find that? Because reading it in a book versus the reality of being in a cellar, and I feel like I might have a stompy vintage in me at some point too, so I can get back in and get a bit messy.
Yeah, we've been very restrained, and we've got 3 lovely wines that I've asked you to select ahead of the show, and these are all sort of lined up here. And given that 2 of the wines are from the same producer, which is the Chaffee brothers from Australia. And of course, we're going to get into the detail of the wine itself and how it's made and all that good stuff. But I wonder, just to sort of link back to and kind of transition, really, it'd be great to hear about I guess, their journey in the UK market, really, bringing them on, building their brand up. What were the key elements that drew you to them, and what have been, I guess, the key sort of building blocks that you and Inotria have used to build them and to create a brand which didn't exist before they started working with you, I presume.
Well, actually,
there we go.
Yeah. So we've got two wines from Chaffee Brothers that I know. I keep looking at them. You probably keep seeing my head move to the side on my video. It's because I keep looking at these wines. I'm getting all
can't resist.
Yeah. So I was very, very lucky to work with Chaffee Brothers with Negotiants UK when where I was before, I was with Inotria, and they were there as well. And sadly, Negotiants UK shut their office over in England, so we all disbanded. I feel like, our ragtag bunch of Aussie and English kids from there disbanded into different parts of the world. But Chaffee and I refound each other at Inotria. So it was like running into, well, literally was running into old friends. It was very, very good to see them, and very, very good to see, I think, with an even bigger sales force and even bigger, I guess, channel opportunities for them as well to really, really grow and fly and stretch. And that's been amazing. So there was no need to build a brand. It's no need to do too much at all, except get that awesome wine out there and to the team. And they've got a really, really great following within the sales team, and obviously a really, really great following within the UK market as well. And I think that's just accessible and fun, and their labels are. This is the part where audio doesn't quite work, but their labels are just so bright and so attractive, and it makes you want to pick up the bottle. It makes you want to touch it. It makes you want to look further at the wine. It just, I think that they've just absolutely nailed it with their packaging, and then to follow through with the juice inside the bottle as well as being fantastic is they're just wonderful to work with, and they're lovely blokes to boot.
Tick.
Exactly. And I have to show you, although I'm wearing my
oh, nice
t-shirt today. There we are.
I love it. I want one. If are they here? Are they on?
Yeah, wow.
Okay,
gosh, I'll see what I can do for
you. I'll happily buy one. It looks.
They're in hot demand at the moment. We have them come over for an event, and we're making the sales force work for them. They've got to earn them.
Yeah, that's it. Amazing. Yeah, and so does that then mean that you were sort of instrumental in building up and taking on the Chaffee Brothers when you were at Negotiants as well? Or
I would love to say yes, I was instrumental, but I wasn't instrumental. No, so I wasn't in there in the buying team or anything like that. It operates a little bit differently as well. I think the collection of producers that were with Negotiants is sort of almost decided in Anguston in the Barossa, because they sort of go through with the Sam Smith and Negotiants sort of team. So I didn't bring them over, but I've been lucky enough to be able to work with them and watch them grow over here, which is very, very cool.
Amazing. Okay, so I mean, then we've obviously got these two wines here, but perhaps before kind of going wine by wine, maybe give us that kind of link back, that kind of overview of who they are and kind of guess what they're doing over there in Barossa, and maybe kind of plug us back into that region, which is where you're of course originally from. Yeah,
so Chaffee Brothers are based in Eden Valley. They've in fact just started a brand new tasting room with the other artisans of Barossa Collective. They've just opened a new tasting house. in the Barossa. Sorry, I digress. The vineyard is and the winery is in Eden Valley. So they don't have fruit themselves, but they've got some lovely families that they source their fruit from. They're not particularly old. They only started together under this label in 2008. So they're quite new and fresh, new kids on the block. So it's Dan and Theo. They have, so they're brother-in-laws. They just wanted to do something a bit different. They're the not ball buster, answers to the red wine, and they just have beautiful interpretations of the white wine as well. So I think their vineyard access, they have quite some quite really beautiful aromatic whites, which I find incredibly expressive, and they just interpret the fruit really beautifully. So we're going to look at 2 wines of theirs today. It was hard to choose which 2 because they are all quite fabulous, but I just thought these are quite interesting. I thought they were quite reflective of what they do in terms of, I'll say experimental style, but it is just a bit left field. It's a bit quirky, and that comes through with the packaging as well. Quirky and lovable. How fantastic is that? So we're gonna kick off, and I haven't poured it yet, but we're going to kick off with the Contrapunkt, which is a Kerner. So as far as I am aware, this is the only Kerner in the Southern Hemisphere, and still waiting to be corrected on that. Not varietal that you see very often at all on its own. It's generally blended. If it is indeed blended at all, it's not a particularly common varietal whatsoever. This one is, done on its own, and we're looking at a whole bunch pressing, and fermentation is on the solid. So what you're getting with this is a lot of really lovely texture, as well as, like pears and apples and a little bit of citrus. It's not super like high pronounced aromatics like you get in, say, a Riesling or a Gewurz, but some really lovely like clean fruit. And then on the palate here, I'm going to have some, and then I'll tell you about the palate. On the palate, there's some really lovely acid, but there's some great texture there, which makes it amazing to have with food. And one of the things that I think I really love about not just this wine, but what the Chaffee brothers do with wine a lot is they just service the Asian market so well in Australia. And I'm really excited to see that emerging market over here with, so I'm talking about my Asian, which is different to English Asian, Oriental. So like Korean, Vietnamese, Thai food and things like this coming through. So this is just amazing with that vibrancy, with something with a bit of heat to it, something with a bit of spice to it, something's got some verve to match the wine.
Yeah. Totally get that. And, it feels as though, again, I'm really, really keen to kind of link this back into what you've been talking about earlier in terms of your role and, working with the sales team and getting this out there. I'll just give my initial impression. This I absolutely love it. It's amazing because it does feel so familiar. There's definitely that Riesling characteristic, I think that I love and that I go for, and that sort of the aromatic, the acidity, the brightness. But there's something else there. It's almost like it's kind of slightly out of left field, and I would almost, I guess, if tasted blind, I might even sort of say this had been blended with another grape potentially. But knowing that it's Kerner, which is itself a crossing, and that it does sort of bring some of those potentially sort of spicier, I guess, sort of characteristics. How does this then go across, and how has this then gone across as, I guess in the sort of new reality where there's maybe more of this going to an off-trade channel than perhaps previously, where it was maybe more on-trade. And feel free to correct me if that's not
yeah. So this one particularly is still more on trade than off trade, and if it is off, it's more like the independent wine merchants. So tends to be, I guess, and I am making generalizations, but I guess half our job is what we do is generalizations, because it's demographic and channel assumptions, isn't it? When it's going to sort of off trade, independents, that sort of stuff, they tend to be more, people that are wanting like a food and wine experience, like we're having fake away, or we've got a box of something that we've bought, the food boxes from the restaurants and that sort of thing. So they want something that's going to go with it. So we haven't had to flip, and I must say there's not a whole heap of Kerner made. So it hasn't got the volumes to sort of really go into off trade, because it is just a parcel within a parcel of a vineyard. But yeah, so this one stays with the foodies, I guess. This one stays with the foodies.
Yeah. I remember you saying earlier that the Chapey brothers actually source all of their fruit, and I think what would be interesting to get from you, again, especially given your entry into the world of wine, really, it's just an idea of what type of environment we're talking about that's produced this wine, because obviously Riesling type grapes have sort of found their home in many different regions around the world. So it would just be interesting to hear, what does this sort of look like, this landscape that we're talking about, which has kind of spawned the grapes for this wine?
So this vineyard is the Fechner family in Eden Valley, sort of Makolta kind of way. So high altitude, hot and dry, but with quite a large diurnal range. So really, really hot during the day, but really, really cool nights. So obviously that's that lovely acid retention that you get in there. I guess to sort of talk about the landscape, it's just really dry. It's the vineyards and Makolta and Eden Valley are kind of on the hill between the Barossa and the Riverland. So there's a rain cloud that sort of sits there, and then it slopes away into literally like nothingness. It's so brown and so dry. So luckily for us, the Barossa is on the cooler side of that, and what rain there is, and this is bearing in mind that South Australia is the driest state on the driest continent. So when I talk about, it gets more rain, it also gets far less rain than many, many other places. But yeah, so I guess the vineyards are, I've got this picture in my mind now of the vineyards. It's, big old gum trees and, sheep's grazing in the next paddock, and yeah, very sort of rural, very remote. Eden Valley and all the way through there is just, it's a very peaceful, very sort of small farming community still. Like the villages are quite small. There's no large towns. All the villages are really just a couple of hundred people. A primary school, a church, and a pub is pretty well what fills them up. And then farms dotted in between. So quite a few vineyards sort of sit along. And obviously, people are there it's mainly Riesling and the white aromatics that are planted up there as well. There's a little bit of reds, but that sort of goes more down to the southern end of the Eden Valley, sort of backing through sort of Lyndoch and Williamstown, that sort of thing.
Just the only other thing that I would say, and I think it's a broader observation, and even just something that I totally love about wine. As I think as you describe those very small rural communities there. A lot of them, I'm sure, globally they are, they're shrinking, people are moving away to cities, and it's actually, wine is something so special that it actually kind of bakes in sustainability of those communities, because you can actually, bottle a commodity that can go around the world and can end up, on my table here in London, and can kind of capture a little bit of that community and that input and all of those things that you've spoken about there, captures them, preserves them, and lets them come, halfway around the world. Or I always just find that so incredible, and it's just, that little time capsule really of that place that's able to get out there and keep telling the story. In here, in New York, and everywhere, really amazing.
I'm writing a piece at the moment, and one of the things that I was touching on in my writing was how I haven't been able to go home for a couple of years now. But as you've exactly just said, like, this is pour in a glass, and the last time that was touched by anyone or anything was it is from where it's from. So I'm able to have this little piece of home, this little piece of not only Australia, but this little piece of the Barossa, this little piece of Eden in a glass, and that's as close as I can get to being, near my mum, near my best friend, near my, near all my people. And that's that, I guess that's that wonderful thing about wine, is you get to enjoy the same glass of wine that I'm enjoying, and, we get to talk about it and share it. And the last time that was open for anyone else was back when the boys were putting it into bottle. It's quite special, really, isn't it? It's sort of, I think, it just makes wine and, have that, I guess it's that terroir and that provenance and that sense of place, but it's that emotive element of that sense of place as well as that physical, oh yes, I can smell the minerals, like, oh, I can smell
Yeah. No, and for me, really, what's huge is that, it lets two, youngish sounding guys, at least, lets them make a living, and lets them, stay where they want to, and I guess, give something back to the community as well. I think it's just this really amazing thing. We get to drink, and we get to hear these stories, and they get to, do what they love, and keep doing it, and doing it in the way that they want to, and everyone's happy.
Yeah, well, this is it, a glass of wine in hand, and if it's a bit of wine from home, I'm even happier. But yeah,
and with the time difference, even more so, right? If you're ever doing training, it's always someone's morning, isn't it? When you're doing UK to Australia. It's like someone's always got to take one for the team. So
absolutely. So second wine is the Paxaturna. So we are a little bit behind in our vintages here in England compared to Australia. So I might have mentioned that there's this small kind of global shipping crisis at the moment.
Teeny weeny one, yeah.
Yeah, just a small one. But so we're a little bit behind in our vintages here. So we're looking at a 2019 Paxaturna, whereas they're now onto the 2021s in Australia. But that's fine. We can drink and catch up.
Yeah, it's like when there used to be such a big gap between the movies coming out in America and everywhere else in the world, isn't it?
So I remember growing up in Australia, our fashion seemed to be 5 years behind all of you guys, and here we are 2 years behind in vintage for the wines. So this wine is, the Paxaturna. So it's an old vine Grenache. Grenache is one of my favourite grape varietals. I think it's quite specific to the Barossa in that it was one of the we've got some of the oldest Grenache plantings, and we've got quite a lot of Grenache plantings. So years and years and years and years and years ago, when the Barossa was first settled by white people, by European settlers, it was obviously populated with Indigenous people before that. The German settlers brought Grenache to start making sacramental wine, which is why we have so much old bloody Grenache. But this one is made, I think this is a really good example of a wine of where the Chaffee brothers have captured an energy and have moved forward with it. This is new Barossa, new wave, Nouveau Barossa Grenache. It's not over extracted. It's not macerated to buggery. It's not, in oak. And I can see looking at the colour there. Yeah. It's a poppy raspberry, vibrant colour. I mean, it could just be, cordial. And I really think that in the glass it looks like Beaujolais, really. It's the whole idea, you know, it's like whole bunch fermented. It's, everything about it's made to keep those aromatics, to keep that freshness, to keep that vibrancy. It doesn't see oak because, again, it's just this nouveau style, which is absolutely brilliant. And it makes the Pax Eterna utterly smashable, which is quite a fun thing.
Love that term, Nouveau Barossa. And does that mean then, you know, just to kind of educate me, you know, say a bit of a newbie here? Does that mean that people were maybe, you know, using those old vines that they had in the past, and maybe sort of, you know, slabbering on lots of oak and, you know, lots of sort of, I guess, winemaker intervention?
Which, you know, as was the style at the time. So for many, many years, you know, if you couldn't stand a pencil up in it, was it even from the Barossa, which was the way, but also winemaker intervention, all that sort of stuff, you know, time in barrel, time, you know, time on skins, all that sort of stuff took time. And when you're making a wine, that also takes money. You've got to have the infrastructure, you've got to have the finances to be able to have a barrel like a French oak barrel, 330 litre hogshead. I mean, this is a couple of years ago now, but it was about 1,500 Australian dollars. Like, it's quite a significant amount of money. Whereas if you're actually not needing to have the setup for that, well, gosh, you're just taking down the cost and increasing the time that you can turn over your wine. I'm not saying that's what these guys did, but because they were such a small startup, that must have been a consideration with how they could finance what they wanted to do, as well as that movement. And I mean, the same thing happened in Barolo, you know, sort of through from the 70s and 80s and then into the 90s, people in Barolo were wanting to make wine not like the way their dads did. And this is exactly what's happening in the Barossa at the moment, is people are wanting to make wine not like their mum and dad did. They're wanting to make wine that's different. They're not wanting to kind of, I guess, stick with the other, you know, the older customs. And so this Nouveau Barossa, which I think is really nicely encapsulated with Chafee, there are a number of other producers now. And another one that springs to mind is Whistler Wines. They're based in Marananga, and they do essentially two collections within their portfolio. The Whistler Wines, so the family of Pfeiffers, which is German for whistle, so they've kind of like, they've used the anglicised name. The wines that their dad was making and their mum was making is under that Whistler, but then they've got this kind of like next gen collection, and everything about it is different, and it is very much this, you know, like fruit and fun and fresh and that sort of style. So this wine, this Pax Eterna, is just, I can see you enjoying it.
I love it. It's actually you know, why I was looking at the color there, I was actually sort of taking myself back to Madrid, which is actually, I would say, you know, the one of the places where I probably had the most world-class Grenache from. You know, the producers over there, especially in the Sierra de Gredos, at quite high levels, they were very they were so welcoming, and they would kind of make a point of where we would trying single vineyard Grenaches, we'd actually have to go to the vineyard to taste it. so they'd be able to kind of tie what we were tasting back to, you know, something specific in the site there. And I was just trying to, I guess this is building such an amazing image, because it absolutely does have that freshness. It does have that sort of crunchy isn't sort of quite the right word, but I've noticed on the tasting note, they're kind of cranberry, just the way that, you know, there is this sort of really fresh fruit, I guess, but and red fruit, but just with that sort of heightened acidity, but really, you know, lovely in that fruit forward respect. But, you know, I'm still getting it. There's this gorgeous herbal component that just sort of lingers and you know, caresses the tongue afterwards, and again that sort of savory element, I think, again, it's probably another one that the foodies are all over as well, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I love that you spoke about the acid with the Grenache, because that you get that freshness on the nose, and then that acid sort of follows through on the palate, and the tannins are there, but they're so fine grained, and then there's that lovely fruit. So there's this lovely length as well as freshness, and like I've had a sip and I can still get that raspberry and cranberry fruit sort of coming around, and it is that, that fresh raspberry and that fresh cranberry rather than cooked or jammy or anything, and 100%. It's just it's lovely, and again, like imagine this with food, and I always like to put when I'm enjoying wine in context of, do I wear shoes? Do I not wear shoes? So I don't think I'd wear shoes for this wine. Kick your shoes off, picnic platter, charcuterie, probably some things on.
Thongs.
Exactly. I didn't say that over here. I've been caught so many times. But yeah, it is just a wine of fun. So like quite literally utterly smashable. Like it's just made for enjoyment.
We've unfortunately now come to the third and final wine that we're going to be tasting together. But this one really stood out for me because you being a Barossa girl, choosing 2 Barossa wines to kick things off. The third wine isn't from Barossa. So I'm guessing there must be a little bit of a story here about why you chose to include this one, I guess, ahead of all the other wines you could have potentially chosen. So, please introduce us to the third wine we've got in the glass here.
Excellent. So the third wine that we're tasting is from Di Martino, and it's a single vineyard Carmenere from Chile. And now the reason I chose this producer and this wine is almost like, those desert island wines, desert island discs that feed on one from the other. The reason I chose this wine is because of the producer, the family, and the winemaking used in this wine is New Wave Chile. This is Carmenere, but not as you would have expected it to be. Mm-hmm. Family-owned winemakers, again, they're into their 3rd and 4th generation. A family estate, so quite different in that respect. But everything about the way they make their wines at Di Martino is about elegance, is about restraint, is about structure. It's not about oak use. It's not about maceration. It's not about tannin. It's just about like that lovely, lovely fruit coming through and being at the forefront of what they do. So that's why I've chosen the Carmenere. So this family have been doing quite a few things from the sustainable side of things as well. They're carbon neutral as a winery, which is quite amazing. They wanted to the boys that are looking after it now, they wanted to sort of tear up the rule book when it came to what Chilean wine should look like. And they're rewriting it, and they're doing it in their own way, and they're doing it with such amazing success. Like the proof is in the pudding, the proof is in the bottle. It's just delicious. So I'm going to have a sniff and then get on the palate. They're obviously a lot bigger than the Grenache, but the acid and the freshness that balances with these really elegant tannins and that lovely cool black fruit coming through. I find it's just, it's such a beautiful example of a varietal that I guess tends to get pushed to the side a little bit, which is, again, the reason I chose it. Like Grenache is a bit uncool, or it was a bit uncool. Carmenere is a bit sort of like, it's a bit common. Whereas this is just such a vibrant, lovely example of a wine from, really great interpretation of fruit and looking at it from a different angle, looking at the way it's made to how they wanted to see the wine rather than what everyone else was doing, to the point now where, it is really inspiring offshoots within that sort of like, I guess, the interpretation of how people are seeing Carmenere as well as how people are seeing Chilean wine.
Amazing. And I must say, I didn't know too much about this wine and the approach before I opened the bottle, but I made a point of opening this about an hour and a half ago because I thought, this is a Carmenere from Chile. It's going to have lots of oak. It's going to need an hour or so to just express itself. And when I poured it out and had that first smell, I was like, hold on a minute, this isn't, I don't get any of those sort of, what I see and what I've always known as sort of classic tones, that kind of sort of oak and then almost more towards sort of chocolatey, almost kind of quite full and rich. And as you say, it absolutely is. Yeah, I can see the different color here from the Grenache, and a different experience. But again, it's as you say, moving from fresh red fruits to fresh black fruits. It's not taking you so far down into the I guess the sort of towards being a meditative wine, which is what I always hear people in Italy talk about. with those really kind of rich wines. This is absolutely so approachable, so drinkable, and I'm sort of again, I think pleased that this is also influencing people around them as well, because I just that is something that I just see as more and more important. As all of these things that are happening to kind of disrupt supply chains and move things around. I think that like loyalty to specific brands and loyalty to regions, I think it's only going to be more important over time. And making incredible accessible wines like this, I think is doing a lot of your job for you, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really just makes everything so much easier. And I love that. I love that when you read the label and you had your expectations and your preconceptions to putting your nose, and I could see your face as you're putting your nose in the glass, and sort of I was thinking, oh gosh, don't tell me it's coarse.
No, I was sort of still looking instinctively for the chocolate, and that rich oak. But this is lovely. It's I think what you'd call as just the not natural wine, but the natural grape and the natural influence of the grape, and obviously that then draws back to everything that goes into that, the region, the people, how the grape's been treated in the vineyard and in the cellar, all of that actually being able to express itself fully, which is just incredible to any wine fan, and especially Chilean wine, which I think is of course exported in large amounts, but there's always room for reinvention and as you say, new wave Chile,
exactly. And it is that it's that de-stemming, and then there's it's the stainless steel ferment that's just maintaining that freshness, that vibrancy of that black fruit in there. And don't get me, this still has the acid and that tannin that you could have this with with something really quite meaty if you wanted to, but also you're not going to get bogged down. I find with some of those big Chilean Carmenères and even, Chilean Cabernets, that sort of thing, they get hard work after more than a glass, whereas this one is it's just such clean and free sipping. And the fact that you're seeing, I like, the naked fruit, it's like the naked chef, isn't it? It's the naked, naked fruit. It is just, and I think this is what I've enjoyed about all three of these wines, is it's just been the fruit purity, and that winemaker has kind of been the vessel to give us that fruit experience rather than, sorry, winemakers, if the ones that are listening, but not having that ego of over winemaking the wine. They're just letting the fruit speak, letting the vineyard speak, letting that sense of place speak, letting that interpretation come through, rather than going, oh, I need to do this, and then I need to do that, and then I need to do that. They're actually just keeping their hands off, because what they're doing is knowing that the relationship with the vineyard and the viticulturists and the quality of the fruit so amazing that all they have to do is not mess it up, and you're getting something absolutely magical at the end.
Yeah, and I think whenever I've had those conversations with the winemakers, my interpretation of it, rightly or wrongly, who knows, has been that actually they've done so much work, and they've put in so much effort, like all through the year, that actually then by the time the snip is made and the grapes are in the cellar and the wine's in the barrel, actually, like, most of the work has actually been done. I mean, it's bloody hard work, but they've actually taken the time to put all of that in, and being able to, just as you say, just sort of draw back from that, and maybe safe in the knowledge that you put in all of that work in the rest of the year.
You can't make good wine from bad fruit.
Yeah. That's it. They can be happily hands off and let nature take its course.
Yeah, exactly.
Incredible. Okay, well, I just want to say another huge thank you, because I've, as you can tell and you can see, I've so enjoyed today. It's been a real revelation for me and a real eye opener for me. So thank you so much for choosing these wines. And I'm going to, really, I always like the guest's voice to be the last one on the podcast. I'll just, keep it really broad and open, because we have, happily darted around a little bit. We've spoken about Barossa, we've spoken about MW, we've spoken about these wines. We've spoken about, of course, Inotria, and we've spoken about COVID. So I just wonder, on any of those topics, or even any new topic at all that you want to sort of bring in, like, as we sort of, sit here or stand here talking October 2021, looking ahead, to the end of the year and ahead into next year, what are the sort of things, or the thing that comes most to mind as you're sort of, most anticipating or looking forward to?
Oh my goodness. Okay, what am I most looking forward to? Well, making it through Christmas. Do you know what? It's simply, and not necessarily related to wine, but everything is always related to wine. Being able to have Christmas with some people that I love. Like, how amazing is that going to be? Drink some really good booze and eat some really good food with some people that make my heart happy is what I'm looking forward to. And it sounds like such a simple thing, but not having the opportunity to be able to do that last year actually has made me double down into the festive season again this year. It really is special. So probably, going forward is, and I love that you spoke about this being sort of a moment in time before I start on my MW is where I'm going to be sort of in October 2022, like what my wine knowledge and palette and how my journey is going to be going then. Like, I have no idea. Hopefully the MW is kind to me. I know it's going to be my own Everest, but hopefully I'm getting as match fit as I can. I'm looking forward to going to Austria. I've never been there, and so actually the thought of wearing some boots and getting into some vineyards and some vines has me giddy with excitement. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And I'm really looking forward to this supply chain shortage being over, because it is a nightmare and a headache for every single one of my colleagues, every single one of my stakeholders. It's just an absolute nightmare. So I'm looking forward to that being a hilarious and distant memory, I think.
A huge thank you to you, Melissa, for your enthusiasm, for sharing your journey, and for sharing such fantastic wines during our conversation. And if you know someone who would really enjoy this episode, then do please share the direct link with them, which is interpretingwine.com/463. See below for Melissa Worrall's 2 Instagram handles. Follow them both so not to miss out on any news. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. Next time on the Interpreting Wine MW Student Series in episode 464, I'll be speaking with Victoria Daskal, founder of the Mummy Wine Club. So make sure you are subscribed to Interpreting Wine Podcast to be alerted when the episode goes live. See you then.